My question for the Minister for Policy and Reform is when a report from the Council of Ministers Single Legal Entity Subcommittee will be produced for debate in Tynwald.
On the Minister to reply, Mr Thomas.
Thank you, Mr President, and to the Honourable Member of Council for that helpful question. The Council of Ministers Single Entity Committee produced an interim report which was laid before Tynwald in June 2017.
Supplementary, Mrs Lord-Brennan.
Thank you, Mr President. I don't believe that report was subject to debate in Tynwald, so that was really where I was going with the question.
As a statement rather than a question.
When will it be debated?
Minister.
Thank you very much. I think that report, the interim report, has been very, very helpful for so much that's happened in the last couple of years. That report is available for a private member's motion, any aspect of it. Lots and lots has happened inside the incremental approach, the approach that was entitled in the title an evolutionary approach to the development of joined up, better functioning public service. There's lots of success which has been picked up inside the programme of government reporting, and pleased to answer any specific questions. But the simple facts, as an honourable member, Mr President, observed earlier on, is that the report was published in July 2017, and any aspect of it had been available for debate in this honourable court since then.
Deputy Speaker, Mr Robert Shaw.
Thank you, Mr President. I'm unaware that the subcommittee of the Council of Ministers considering the single legal entity has been shut down or closed. Could he confirm what the position is with regard to that committee?
Reply, sir.
Thank you, Mr President, and that's a very helpful question from Mr Deputy Speaker. No, the committee still exists. It hasn't met. I think in 2017 the committee seemed more important than it did now because events have overtaken us in as much as profound developments like the Sir Jonathan Michael review in the Health Service have drawn on so much that's in the report that we put together, the really valuable report that we put together as committee colleagues back in 2017. There have been developments triggered by some of the Tynwald committees to do with criminal justice strategy and modernisation, to do with Vision 9 and learning from that, to do with the way that the subcommittees have worked. So much has happened. People strategy, digital strategy, smart service framework, the suggestion of executive agencies, all of that was sketched in the single legal entity interim report, and so much of that has informed developments in government for this island, financially responsible government over the last 18 months, 2 years or so. I do think it would be valuable for the committee to meet again now, and like I said before Christmas, I think it should meet now.
Lord-Brennan.
Thank you, Mr President. From my assessment, the happening of the committee has come against the background of things that have happened really since 2006. When did the committee last meet together?
Reply, sir.
Thank you. The last formal meeting was June 2017, and I believe we've only had one meeting since. But the main point here is that this is not a Council of Ministers subcommittee that needs to be active. The action and the suggestions for incremental and evolutionary development of government are going on, and they are happening, and they will continue to go on. And I think we can all be very proud of the achievements coming from that report around people strategy, digital strategy, smart service framework, the investigation of different ways of organising government, all the stuff from the Equality Act, from data protection that was considered in the report. The Government Departments Act Amendment Bill is in the programme for government legislative programme. We could look to have a more fundamental piece of legislation which is also provisionally outlined inside the government programme. Just because a committee is not meeting, it's not the end of the world. What matters in all of this is action. What matters in all of this is we break down silos. What matters in all of this is we spend every pound of public money wisely on the best possible public service. And that's happening, and there are massive debates coming up. For instance, in May, with the Sir Jonathan Michael report debate and the Public Accounts Committee report, and other debates that will be coming up this summer and through to the autumn are absolutely crucial in the evolution of Isle of Man government and its relationship, in fact, with Tynwald Court.
Supplementary, Ms August Hanson.
Thank you, Mr President. I just wanted to ask the Minister if he feels that you know, these meetings are valuable if they haven't met quite so often as perhaps some in this court might feel they should? And also, does he feel that progress is happening quick enough? Because I'm sure that there, you know, are still some very sort of serious issues regarding communications between departments in various different areas.
Reply, sir.
Quite clearly there are issues that arise from time to time and they need to be dealt with. But let me just compare two situations about the work of committees. On the one hand, we had a committee that considered Lord Lisvane's regulations and lured it into a cul-de-sac and slowly strangled those recommendations. On the other hand, we've got a committee that worked on the single legal entity and actually put together a really good paper that's informing what's happened for the last couple of years and is actually delivering something worthwhile. And that's the main thing to say in this. Committees are not necessarily the way to change the world. It's action and policy development that changes the world.
Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr President. The Minister of Policy and Reform seemed very keen to tell us this morning that all the questions have been very helpful. Can I commend the Minister in his complex answer to the Honourable Member for Council? And doesn't that itself suggest that it really would be helpful to draw all these thoughts together on the part of the committee, perhaps soon after we hear in May, Tynwald, about Sir Jonathan Michael's report and the PAC report? Do you not think it would be helpful soon after that for the committee to sit and consider?
Minister.
Mr President, I agree with those very helpful and perspicacious. Deputy Speaker.
Honourable Member Mr Hooper.
Thank you very much, Mr President. The Minister seems very keen to highlight just how important this work was as a bedrock for all the evolutionary change that is happening throughout government. My question for the Minister, my first question is, who is overseeing this joined-up approach to all this evolutionary change if the committee isn't meeting? Who is responsible for making sure that all these various projects and strategies are all tied together in a sensible and joined-up way? And my second question for the Minister is, he stated the main purpose of this work was to ensure we end up with a joined-up and better functioning public service. Does he not feel that something that is of that importance really should be debated on the floor of this honourable court? And does he feel that really government should be the ones driving that delivery, not a private member bringing a motion to debate what is essentially a government reform project?
Reply, sir.
Thank you. Council of Ministers is responsible for executive government. Tynwald Court is responsible for major changes in policy and in its branches for legislation. I think if you close attention to the interim report, we'll lay out all of these things, and I would think any neutral, impartial observer of the process in the last 2 years will see that the Council of Ministers has been changing itself and the way it operates to move towards taking on any silo interest, whether it be from a local authority or from a department or from a vested interest in public policy terms. So the programme for government, which we own collectively and we'll be discussing later today, includes amendments this year, as it did last year, about one public service, about single legal entity related type concepts. We should have a debate. I'm quite surprised sometimes that some of the debates didn't come forward from members to support things, to test the will for certain things, but I'm absolutely sure we're going in the right direction. Council of Ministers owns this policy. The Chief Minister leads Council of Ministers, chairs the Council of Ministers, and watch that space. I think it's a very helpful suggestion to continue the work of the committee in June with a view to having a debate later on this year.
Right. Let's try not to be repetitive. We're all being extremely helpful to each other this morning. Help me by keeping this supplementary short and not repetitive. Mrs Lord-Brennan.
Thank you, Mr President. The interim report mentioned recommendations specifically to do with incremental reforms to legislation. The programme for government says progress further incremental reforms to the machinery of government. These things are quite different. And given the statement about that interim report informing what's happened over the past few years, is it just the case that some of this stuff is just happening behind the scenes?
That's It's a good question. No, every time we change legislation, it's in public in the branches. Every time we change major policies, it's in public in the Honourable Court. Yeah, there have been differences in the way that legislation is being cast in the last couple of years. There has been increased reference to council ministers making orders rather than departments making orders and that sort of thing. There's also been a greater focus on the council ministers' subcommittees. So council ministers' subcommittees have taken cross-government policy initiatives, important ones on climate change, on single-use plastics, on various parts of social care and health, which needed cross-government views. We're working on joint procurement and joint commissioning on a major policy for early help, early intervention to improve the situation for young people at the moment. That's all happened, and I like to think all that's happening in public because it's necessary for this court to be taken on. Have we sat down and said, do we want a single legal entity? No, we haven't. But we also haven't said no to working together more, to abolishing silos, to joining things up, and that's what's been happening successfully for the last couple of years. And it's not only this interim report, it goes back to when we had our first Minister of Policy and Reform 5 years ago, who talked about some of the things in that first interview recorded by Manx Television, about exactly what he wanted to achieve for the last 5 years. And very helpfully, I was watching that again now, and I think we can say we have achieved a lot of what was in the vision of Chris Robertshaw in 2014. And it goes back further to the scope and structure of government reports in 2006 and 2012. A lot of our...
I think, Minister, with respect, I think you've answered the question.
We're all doing very well, Mr President.
Miss August Hanson, a supplementary.
Thank you,
Please.
Mr President. I just wanted to ask the Minister, as he's in a good place to answer this question, as he's on the Council of Ministers Legislative Subcommittee, what level of progress, or whether he can perhaps provide any level of detail on the Government Departments Act Amendment Bill.
It's a helpful question.
It's,
I don't know how long you would require to answer.
very short.
Short, good.
Yeah. A close observer of the interim report will see that we sketched what was needed to be in that bill inside the interim report, and that bill is scheduled before the end of this administration.
Final supplementary, Mr Shimmons.
Thank you, Mr President. The Minister for Policy and Reform assured us that this matter has not been languishing in a cul-de-sac, although it does feel that perhaps it's been shunted into a siding for a year or so. I did hear, though, that he said that a debate would be helpful and he's going to shunt it out the siding. When will this debate take place? Perhaps I could give him a choice to keep it brief. October or November this year? Which would suit him best?
Council ministers will discuss that when they conclude business for the autumn, but I think October and November would be a good time.